So we are here to recap the Royals and the Tigers series. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the recap. So this series ended up being only a 3-game series because Game 4 did end up getting canceled. That game got postponed to July 11th. This is the second game this week that has been postponed, which really kind of stinks because on my days off, I really want to enjoy some Royals baseball, even though at times it can be very frustrating, especially this past series against the Tigers. Now the Tigers, because it was a 3-game series, they ended up winning the series 2-1. The Tigers ended up taking the first 2 games of the series, and the Royals took what was the final game of the series. And this series was very frustrating for me watching the Royals play, and that's just me being 100% honest, because the Royals pitching this series I thought was really good in this series, because that was one thing that the Royals were kind of lacking, it felt like, because you had Bubic giving up a whole bunch of runs. You know, there was his first start of the season, he couldn't even get it out of the first inning. And then you have Carlos Hernandez. You know, he didn't pitch particularly good. He had a better outing than Bubic did, but Hernandez didn't really get out and have a spectacular start. But if you look at the pitching in the 3 games, like, the pitching was the least of the worries for the Royals, because you look at Game 1, Zach Greinke, he went out there, had a really good showing, had another nice showing of the season. Both of his starts this season have been really good. He pitched 5 1/3 innings. He gave up 5 hits, and he only gave up 2 runs. He didn't strike anybody out, which is the 4th time in his career that he did that. But overall, Zach Greinke had a really good solid start. And then you have Brad Keller. He pitched his guts out. Like, Brad Keller pitched lights out for the Royals in Game 2. He had an absolutely amazing night. He ended up pitching 7 great innings, only gave up 3 hits. Now, 2 of his runs did come on a home run by Torkelson, but he had 5 strikeouts. He went 7 innings deep, and he gave the Royals one hell of a start. That quality start by Brad Keller was completely wasted by the Royals. And then in Game 3, Bubic, he came back, pitched Game 3, and he had a much better outing. And this time around, he pitched 4 1/3 innings. He had 6 walks, which, again, 6 walks is a few more. But when it comes to Chris Bubic and the way that he struggled in the first outing of the season, you got to take baby steps here. And overall, really solid pitching performance by all 3 of the starting pitchers in this series. I thought the bullpen did a fairly solid job picking up where the starters left off, and they limited the damage of the Tigers for the majority of the season. They're really, when it comes to the pitching in this series, I don't really think that there was much to complain about. I think the Royals did a fantastic job when it comes to their pitching, and it showed a whole bunch of promise. Like, the pitching, it was bad for a few games there, especially during that 5-game losing streak. But late in that losing streak, and then up until they got their first victory after 5 games losing, the pitching was not the problem whatsoever. The pitching was fantastic for the Royals. Like, if this is the kind of pitching that the Royals are going to get from their starters, I don't think there's really much that we need to complain about. But it's not the pitching that's the problem right now. The problem with the Royals right now is the lack of offense. Like, this offense is literally non-existent for the Royals. Their defense, spectacular. Their defense is lights out, great. Bobby Witt Jr. is showing that he's a stud. Mondesi's great. Lopez is great. You have Benintendi, Michael A. Taylor, Whit Merrifield. Like, those guys are defensive studs. Like, they're great at defense. But at some point, the defense can only get you so far. Great pitching can only get you so far. And that's what, just as a side note, the whole win-loss record for pitchers is something that never made sense to me, because Brad Keller literally got credited with a loss after going 7 innings, only giving up 2 runs. And I'm like, Brad Keller is not even close to the reason why the Royals lost that game. So in baseball, that is one thing that I've never really, I mean, when I was younger, I was like, oh, cool, this pitcher, 10-2 for the season, whatever. Now I'm looking at it, it's like, even in today's day and age, when pitchers aren't even going as late as they used to, but Brad Keller pitching 7 innings gets charged with a loss, and that he had nothing to do with that loss. Kind of frustrating that that's even a stat in baseball. I kind of wish that stat would just die and go away, because Brad Keller wasn't even close to the problem. But the problem is just the lack of offense. Game 1 especially, because Game 1 they had many chances to score in that game. They left a lot of runners on base. First inning, Bobby Witt Jr. hits a triple. They couldn't bring him home. Second inning, they had runners at second and third with 1 out. Didn't score anybody. They were able to finally score in the 4th inning with the Hunter Dozier triple, and then Michael A. Taylor hitting him in, and then Whit knocks in Taylor. But at the same time, the Royals had way too many opportunities in Game 1 to score. They had that's something that's got to change. Like, you cannot be getting a triple with favorable counts. I think Bobby Witt Jr. may have had one out. I don't know if there's quite an out yet there, but when you have a runner on third base with a couple outs that you can play with, you got to knock that guy home. Have a productive at bat, get a sacrifice fly or something. You've got to knock that guy home, because if you knock that guy home in the way that game was going, honestly, the Royals may have been able to sustain something and win that game, because the pitching was great. You add another run with Bobby Witt Jr. coming in. The game's 4-3. Who knows how the game would shake out, but they ended up losing game 1 4-2. And then just with Zach Greinke again, game 1, spectacular. He did great getting out of a jam, and the second inning, that was the inning that he gave up his 2 runs. He didn't give up more runs. He had bases loaded twice in the first inning, and I thought he did a great job getting out of that jam. And he used his great bullpen, the great defense that the Royals had. Brents did struggle coming out of the bullpen in that game. He gave up the final 2 runs to seal the deal for the Tigers in game 1, so the Tigers did take game 1. But other than that, the Royals, I thought, just didn't take advantage of the opportunities in game 1. Game 2, obviously, it's more of the same. When you have Brad Keller going out there pitching 7 great innings of baseball, making 1 mistake, giving up only 2 runs in a start, you've got to capitalize on that, because the bullpen came in, backed him up. Tigers didn't score anything after that. The only thing the Tigers scored on was that 2-run home run by Torkelson, and the Royals lost 2-1. So the bats were just completely lifeless in the second game of the series. Literally, they just couldn't score anything. They scored 1 run. They only got 5 hits. Santana batted in the only run of that entire game. And then when they did have guys on base, they literally just weren't doing anything productive when those guys get on base. I mean, Nicky Lopez got on base twice. He didn't advance. Salvi got a double in the 6th inning of that game. Didn't advance. Like, that's the most frustrating thing. You get something going. You feel like, all right, here's a rally. Here's the Royals. They're going to come in. They're going to, be that gritty team. Like, they show that they can start something. They just can't finish anything. Because you get Salvi, you get a double. It's like, all right, here we go. Let's get some runners in. And then, nothing happens. Salvi doesn't even advance a base. But I guess there was one upside with game 2, because the 1 run they did score, they were able to be productive with 2 outs in the inning. So that is something that is solid from that game if we're trying to take a positive from it. But overall, that game was gross, and the fact that the Royals were only able to score 1 run with one of the most spectacular pitching performances Brad Keller may ever put on again. I don't want to overhype it, but that was spectacular what Brad Keller did. It just felt like a waste. Game 3, again, another solid game of pitching. Chris Bubik had a much better outing, like I mentioned earlier. The 6 walks, got to limit those, but baby steps. It's a much better outing by Chris Bubik. And then once he did come out, the bullpen, backed him up, locked down the Tigers. They only gave up 2 hits the rest of the game. So the pitching in this series, like I said, the pitching in this series is great. I have no complaints about the pitching in this series. That's just something that they've got to continue to build on. But I also thought that game 3 of the series, where the Royals did win 3-1, I thought that was a good building, a good stepping block for the Royals that they can use, because they had good pitching. They had good, solid pitching to back up Bubik. But the problem is I just think the offense needs to work a little bit better. 3 runs, the Royals only gave up 1. The Royals have a spectacular defense. That's something that we will never look over. The Royals have a great defense. But 3 runs. Offense was better. Hunter Dozier did get a 2-run blast, which Hunter Dozier, he's having a really solid start to the season, along with Andrew Benintendi. Those 2 guys are having really nice starts to the season, which is something I'm not going to complain about. Those 2 guys are definitely playing great. Bobby Witt Jr., his bat needs to liven up, but he did have his first multi-hit game of his career in the 3rd game of the series, so that was something that the Royals can build on. There was a lot in game 3 that I think the Royals can build off of. You have a pitcher that, was able to get into the 5th inning at least, didn't get out of the 5th inning, but went into the 5th inning. The bullpen came up, backed him up. The offense, it had opportunities. It hit a 2-run homer. Bobby Witt, he's getting multi-hit games. Andrew Benintendi, he's having good, solid start to the season. But there's just a lot of things that they can build on. They just got to continually progress and get better at those things. Hopefully this 2-5 record that they have does get better. They're on a 1-game winning streak now after a 5-game losing streak to go to 3-5 on this season. Just one thing I did not like about game 3 was the fact that Hunter Dozier got thrown out at home, which is another thing that kind of can go back to game 1 when it comes back to opportunities. I really think they probably should have kept Dozier on 3rd there and then let the bats try to do something and then knock him in that way, because I don't getting thrown out at home, especially when Dozier was out by a mile when that ball was thrown. Not really a big fan of that, but overall, good performance in game 3, and then you have Staumont coming in, throwing gas, throwing 101. So the bullpen, great. But overall, series, not a lot of things that the Royals can build on. They need to take advantage of situations. They've got to back up some great pitching, and then the bullpen has just got to continue doing what it's doing. The bullpen was fairly solid in this series. But that's my recap of the Royals and Tigers series. Give me your thoughts down below of what you thought of this series, and I'll see you in the next one.